we really haven't talked too much, really, about what we were going to talk about today.
And what was that, Tom?
Well, I mentioned to you that I thought it would be a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's in. Now he's awake. About death.
A barrel of laughs.
Isn't it?
Let's just go for it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
I think I texted you back when you suggested the idea, and
You
I said
did.
a bowl of laughs.
You did.
And then afterwards, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that isn't the phrase.
No, it's not.
Bowl of laughs.
I left you alone about that. But
Yeah.
But trust me, I noticed it.
But why would it be a barrel of laughs? Anyway, yeah, let's do it. Death, apocalypse, absolutely.
Dystopia.
Dystopia.
The end of the world.
This sounds like this great action movie.
Well, sure it is. It actually is most
Donnie and
action
Marie,
movies.
Apocalypse and Dystopia.
Well, that was their Vegas act, which they're ending now. Apocalypse and Dystopia. Donnie and Marie. Yeah.
Colon.
Oh, man.
But to your point.
Yeah.
This is actually an interesting topic, and maybe
Is
it's
it? Well,
faded.
thank you. I
Maybe
appreciate
it's-
you lowering yourself to my level to,
No,
to say
I
it's
think
interesting.
I'm glad you put it on the table.
Yeah.
I'm glad you just sat
Well,
it there.
I didn't. You put it on the table, but okay. But
This
before
whole
you tell
idea-
me that, I want to make clear, we're talking about death
And-
as it's celebrated in cultures.
Cultures.
Because different cultures around the world celebrate it differently.
Okay, so, and after all, this is...
Oh.
Oops! Your
culture's showing.
And I'm Dean,
And I'm Tom.
and this is what we talk about.
It is today.
But, well, culture, and how
Yeah,
different
well-
cultures interpret human experience.
Right. And the ultimate human experience
Is-
that we will all share in at some point,
Is,
death.
that's not the ultimate, but it is the end.
The end. It's the final experience.
I've had a few experiences on the
Final
way.
experience.
that
We're
have been
back
much-
into a trailer
that
for
have
the
been
movie.
much more
again.
ultimate than that, I think.
Wait, I'm sorry. I wasn't listening to you at all. I was talking about yeah, it is. And it's kind of like, well, that was cool. And then you're dead, you know? So I'm just guessing here.
And so some cultures view death differently, celebrate it differently.
Celebrated considerably.
And even the word celebrate, I think when we use it, we being U.S. Americans, we're talking about woo, celebration.
Well, it sounded like a ghost.
But
See?
But we're talking about it in the classic sense of the word, which is
Right.
how do we send them off? How do we cross the River Styx?
Okay.
Yeah, and different cultures do it differently.
Absolutely.
And I'm
Some
thinking,
actually use a boat.
It is so appropriate that we're talking about this,
Is it?
actually. Even though there was a little intuitive response when you came up with the idea inside me that said, this is going to be depressing. Like, do we really
Sure.
want to talk about this?
Well, that's it. I mean, if you say we're going to talk about death today, I think people are going to
Death, dystopia, and the apocalypse.
Yes, now we're back in the movie theater again.
Here she comes.
We should
Ooh.
have drive-in theater. Is the ghost back? I thought it was the ghost.
No, that was dystopia coming
Oh,
on
I said
screen.
dystopia's back in the room. They should have drive-in movie theaters for this. That's what you need for that kind of movie. And the drive-in movie theater died, appropriately enough.
Oh, see?
Yeah, well, there you go. Anyway, sure, we don't want to tell people that we're talking about the downside of death. We want to talk about how the living celebrate in a form that is appropriate the fact that people have died and respect for them. That's what's really driving a lot of this.
And I'm thinking this is an interesting idea that you came up with because don't look
thanks.
now.
Yeah.
Don't look now.
Don't look now.
But behind you
yeah,
at this moment.
yeah.
Oh, man. How do I talk about this?
I don't know. What can I turn around?
No.
Okay.
There's a...
Is it a large spider?
No. There's a purple bag
Yeah.
on the shelf behind you.
Right.
That has the remains of my cat.
Okay, that's not too weird.
Yeah, let me give you the backstory.
Why don't you tell them the name
Well,
of your
my
cat?
cat was Banquo.
Yes, and why was he Banquo?
An eponymous name because he was an all white cat, and so Banquo's ghost, like a ghost, from
Right.
Shakespeare.
Right, from Shakespeare,
Right.
yes.
So,
But that's kind of interesting that we have his remains from... He's been cremated, I'm assuming.
we lost Banquo last year. Well,
In August?
last year, and so we had him cremated.
Yes.
I miss him terribly.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, see,
I'm
and
sorry about
you
that.
see, and mourning and how we mourn is
Yes.
also different in different cultures.
Absolutely.
Right. And so Banquo, we lost. He was a great character, by the way. He had a fabulous life. I think we gave him a great life.
He had a real attitude, and he was a rescue cat, right?
He was.
And when I tell you that, I don't have to tell you, but when I tell the listeners that he had a great life, he truly had a great life.
He was one of those cats where you would say, when I go, I want to come back like Banquo.
Oh, absolutely. You say that.
Because, we were his staff and,
Yep.
and he ran the show.
Oh, yes.
And at his height, at his apex.
Yes.
Or is it his apogee?
Let's go with apex.
Apex.
Yeah.
At his apex. It's grammar time.
Grammar time. Everybody loves grammar
grammar
time. Thank you, grammar time.
So it's apex, right?
I love grammar time.
Me too. That's why we go there. So anyway, at his apex, he was a big sucker. He was like over 20 pounds.
Yeah, I remember. Carried it well, too. He carried out a little rolling cart underneath his stomach.
Really,
Yes.
it scraped the ground when he walked. He enjoyed his food, and he had as much weight as he had years because we lost him in I think it was almost 20.
About 20, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we had to decide, what to do. So we cremated him, and he's now in this little jar in a box in the purple bag because we want to bury him, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Hey, you had an urn once with someone's remains in it.
I did. My brother-in-law, his mother passed away, and my brother-in-law and my sister were living out of state in Florida or North Carolina at the time. They've moved between them. And so she was cremated. But she lived.
After she died.
Well, I don't know. I didn't ask questions.
It wasn't a Joan of Arc thing.
It was
or anything.
no. Joan d'Arc is Jeanne d'Arc, or I think
Jeanne d'Arc.
If so, I was given this urn with these ashes in it and told that it was his mother, and asked,
why was it given to you?
Well, because they. That's a real good question. Actually, they lived not far from where I lived, or I live. So, and they actually had lived there for many years, and I live near the beach, and they had lived near the beach, a different beach.
Oh, so they wanted to be sprinkled and
She
spread.
wanted to be sprinkled on the beach. So I was given that. Now, it was given to me at a time of year when really going down and sprinkling ashes on the beach were not the choice. So instead,
Cold.
And I have no idea whether I'm going to get a call now from, people who monitor these kinds of things about the biohazard or something, but this was many, many years ago.
What was the problem? It was too cold to go out on the beach and do it?
It was too cold for me to go out. I wasn't going to bust my hump to get out there to do
but
it.
then if you do it
She
in the
was
summer,
dead. She wasn't going anywhere.
then if you do it in the summertime when everybody's out on the beach, it's like, could you move aside, please? We don't want you to get the ashes.
There had to be a little discretion. Well, look, so he said, and he knew I was going to wait for a time when it was appropriate to do it. So I did it.
I remember because when we came over for dinner one night,
yes.
You brought the urn out. And
yes. Well, no, actually what happened, I didn't bring it out. What had happened, he had given it to me in the colder weather. And so I had been waiting, and we were into the springtime. And I believe we were having lobster for dinner, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
which
right.
We are wont to do.
That's right.
And I was sitting there, and suddenly the conversation reminded me that I had her in my garage.
So we've had this conversation of death, dystopia,
and
apocalypse. Are you okay?
I don't know what that was.
Did you just die?
Yeah.
Before. And it reminded you then, and you said, oh, by the way, I have somebody in an urn.
I have a woman in my
in the garage.
And I have to go bury on the beach. And
which
you were questioning coming over for dinner at that point, I think.
Well, we were questioning whether we should stay for dessert.
Right.
How do you want to go?
Well, first of all, I'm hoping it is a long time before I have to execute this, so to speak. But I believe I will be cremated, and I would like to be what I did with my mother's ashes, because when my mother passed away in 2012, we ended up, she was cremated. She made all of her plans. She wanted to be cremated, and we were going to bury her in a cemetery alongside my father, in a local cemetery where she had spent many, many years raising her family, including me. And so I was given the ashes because I live nearby, and to keep until the time came when we could get the ceremony and do the ceremony. Again, it was a weather thing, happened to be a weather thing. So instead, at one point, I actually made the decision, because in conversations I had had with her in the year before she passed away, we had kind of spoken about this, and I decided that I would sprinkle some of her ashes in various spots that were important to her in her time living in that area, which included in the towns along the area, growing up and time with her father and things like that. So so she ended up being both spread, sprinkled, and buried.
And burned. Burned, spread, sprinkled, and buried.
Burned, spread, yeah.
So she got it all. But you know what? Knowing her, and I did know her for a brief period, she would have gotten it all. I mean,
oh yes,
she was a tough bird.
She would have, and she would have appreciated us kind of joking about it. That wouldn't be anything that she'd be upset about.
And you see, there are some cultures that truly celebrate, and I use the word celebrate in its classic sense. You know,
well, you're a classy guy.
Clinical sense, you know, that how do we express how we feel, you know, at that moment that we're all going to have, right? Or that, you know, when Uncle so-and-so goes, you know, like, is going to be a celebration? Are we going to mourn? Are we going to, you know, rend our garments? I mean, are we going to be in fits of despair? And different cultures have different ceremonies to get us through this in different ways. And
it's been sort of over the years, much like other things in culture, it's been done certain ways, and it's sort of gotten a vote of approval by the group, so that it's common that they act in these manners.
It becomes a custom that they can all share. It's expected, and everybody knows what to expect, and that there's a comfort in that, I think.
It can be vastly different from culture to culture.
Very much so. And, you know, I think you were mentioning before there were the Caribbean cultures.
The Caribbean cultures, yeah. We haven't spoken a lot about that, but
New Orleans, which is a northern Caribbean culture.
You have, yes. Yes, absolutely. But mainly they're being dictated to by the geography of where they are and what's going on, because they have to bury their dead above ground.
Yeah, because of the floods.
Because of the floods, the water tables, and you can't dig 6 feet deep or it all floods.
Right,
and that's
so the tombs are above ground.
The tombs are above ground.
The cemeteries
It's not just like people lying around. They have a little respect for the people. In fact, they have considerable respect for the people. If you've ever seen I'm thinking specifically about New Orleans and Puerto Rico, because if you've seen the cemeteries there, they are quite interesting and beautiful, really.
Well, there are these mausoleums that are above ground,
right?
And you know, depending on how you built it and how much money you had,
they can be smaller ones for like one person. Right. They can be larger ones, which are small, almost small houses.
And it almost, you know, it almost carries a lot more information, a lot more history, because it's all there. It's not like under the ground.
Sure.
Right, you know, it reminds me of in Cairo, there's a whole area, or it's making me recall this, called the City of the Dead. and it's a neighborhood of Cairo where, because space is so critical in Cairo, there's so little of it, and the population is so massive, where people have moved in to portions of the ancient cemetery, and they're now living in these mausoleums.
Now, are they moving in like as a home?
Yes, they live here. They live there. You can visit, and they have tours.
Very interesting. Well, I hope to, but in this life, not in the next one.
But that's a function of, I think, economy of available space.
Sure. Again, we have outside influences creating need. And so that happens. So you have the geographic situation, but you also have the political or social things.
Yeah, and all of that creates a set of customs that everybody then follows. In East Asia, I'm thinking, Japan, China, it's particularly for Chinese focused cultures.
Yes.
So certainly China, but Vietnam, Hong Kong, Taiwan.
Yes.
They have a holiday actually called the holiday of the angry ghosts.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a day where you go to the ancestors' graves and you sweep them up, you clean up, right?
Yeah.
And you talk to the ancestors and you check out how they're doing, And what you want to do is you want to send things to the ancestors so that their life should be a good life wherever they are.
Okay.
So what they do is people bring papier-mâché effigies of things that can make your life more comfortable, like washing machines.
Really?
And they burn them. And you burn the paper effigy of the washing machine.
Sure.
And the smoke goes up to the ancestors.
That's very practical to bring a washing machine.
Right?
Yeah. Well, my goodness.
And the thing is, and if you don't send these things to the ancestors in the smoke, they get angry. They come back angry.
That's when they're going to come back. So this is something to settle the spirits.
So you want to assuage the spirits, right? You don't want to risk somebody coming back and doing something to you in the here and now.
Right.
So everybody's burning all these things, sending them up to their ancestors. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Now in Mexico, they also have a Day of the Dead.
The Day of the Dead, where you go and you
I'm
clean.
Thinking November 2nd. I might be wrong, but it's in
November 1st. I think it correlates with All Hallows Eve.
Does it? I'm not
Saints
sure.
Day. I think it's
I'm going to bet on
Saints Day.
2nd, and then Torin. Oh, by the way, Torin's here.
Hey, Tor. How you
Tor.
doing?
Hey, I'm good. I actually just quickly looked this up, and it's actually on both November 1st and 2nd. It's a multi-day festival, so it begins November 1st.
The day after Halloween.
Right.
All Hallows Eve.
Right.
So we're going to go to the grave and we're going to clean it, and we spend the day at the grave having a picnic, having a party.
Okay.
With friends, family members.
Yep.
And you're at the gravesite of these important ancestors, maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents, brothers, sisters, whatever. And but it's happy because you're communing with them.
Yeah.
You're connecting with them again. And while it's a spiritual experience, it's also a joyous one.
Right.
But Mexico, and maybe this attitude comes out of the Day of the Dead, or maybe it's the other way around, chicken and egg, these things, you don't know the source. But in Mexico, there's a playfulness around the whole concept of death.
In many ways, right?
There are these figures you can buy in the street of death, of skeletons.
Skeletons, yes, I've seen.
And people dress up and have the most marvelous makeup of the face, and it looks like a skeleton.
So that they're kind of like a half a face of one thing and then a skeletal face on the other half.
And it's all
things like that.
It's all joyful
and extraordinarily well done. Yes,
yeah, very well done, very artistic in many ways, and there's a playfulness with death because many Mexican writers have talked about this, and they've said the Mexican understands death, and therefore they understand life. They can celebrate life in a way that, and this message has been said so many times in literature, universally in so many cultures, that you can't live if you're afraid of death.
Right.
You have to embrace death in order to embrace life.
Right.
And in Mexico, it's embedded into the culture. And in the United States, it seems like, we're all just trying to run away from death.
In many ways,
and
yes.
then, one of the existential questions that we always ask ourselves is, am I really enjoying my life? Am I really living? Well, maybe stop running, you just enjoy, these are inevitabilities.
Well, I think if you don't see it as a frightening thing as much, then it doesn't preoccupy you on a kind of daily basis, so that alters how you live your life. I suppose if you make the most of it because of that, that's a good thing. But unfortunately, people tend to be scared of it, like you said.
Yeah, we drive by a cemetery and we hold our breath.
Right.
Some sort of strange superstition like that. No, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
You're here now, and just, get the most of it, because this is where you're going to wind up.
Right.
Either buried,
in one way or another. Yeah.
Or sprinkled and spread.
Yes. And it's further. Now, see, there's an interesting aspect of all of this, and there's so many directions. We're going to come back to this one in another podcast. Death is too big not to be covered in numerous ones, but the whole concept. And throughout the United States, we tend to bury our dead. There are mausoleums, but they're not the dominant area. Although in areas where there's less space, sometimes those
traditionally,
things are happening.
but cremation has become very, very popular.
Much more
now.
common.
Yeah,
yes.
Much more common.
So, but what is the thought process that says you need to put this dead person's body in the ground?
I think it's connected, and I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing here.
Well, what the hell do we have you here for?
I don't know.
If you don't know for sure.
Right.
I gave you this ahead of time so you'd do homework,
Oh, man.
Yeah. Or maybe I didn't give it to
All
you.
right, well, then I'm going to give you the definitive answer.
Okay, this is the okay.
This is the definitive
Because normally
answer.
you obnoxiously say the definitive answer right away.
And this time I was hedging my bets, and you jumped all over
it.
All over
You think you're getting by with that? No, not happening.
What are we talking about?
I have no idea. Oh, we're burying people in the ground. Why are we burying people in the ground?
I think it's connected to the Judeo-Christian concept of ashes to ashes.
Well,
and
it could be. We
dust to
didn't come
dust.
out of the ground, though. I mean, although there is
Some
that
of us
concept
have.
of being
Some
created.
of us did.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Good point. It's I guess if we look at the story of Adam, that type of background of where we came from, and we look at it as he was made of clay, and so yes, that's thus the
exactly.
ashes to ashes.
Right.
So based off of that, I see what you're saying. While listening to this, you may think, hey, I wonder, well, if you have a question like that and want to ask us, there's a couple of ways you can do it. One would be through email, which is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. That's oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And then there's also our handle on Twitter, which is oopscultureshow. That's OOPS Culture Show. I know. It's not original, but it works. Okay?
In India, cremation has always been the Hindu way. That was the Hindu way of doing it. And several years ago, I was in Varanasi. The old name of the town was Banaras, but it's Varanasi. This is the spiritual center. When you want to die, and you're a devout Hindu,
this is the place to die.
You go to Varanasi.
Everybody's going to Varanasi to die.
Yes, if you can.
Yeah.
If your family can send you there you go.
Sure.
And it was really an incredible experience to be there, because this is, and you've probably seen pictures of this. This is down by the River Ganges, the Ghats, the docks by the river there. This is where they put the bodies on these wooden pyres and set them aflame at night. Now, by the way, they're burning all day, 24/7.
The fires are burning all day.
Yeah, and the bodies as well.
And they're because people are bringing bodies one after another.
One right after the other.
It's like a assembly line or disassembly line in this case, I guess.
To get down to the Ghats, you're actually going down to the river, right?
Yeah.
So you're walking downward, and you're surrounded, as you are in India, by hundreds of thousands of people, no matter where you are.
It's so symbolic.
And there you're walking down these streets, these tiny little narrow lanes, and coming right behind me on the side was this cart with a shrouded body on it, and the family walking along with Uncle Raj, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to go down to the river, and they're going to put him on a pyre, and they're going to set him afire. And I was overwhelmed by the whole ceremony of the place because it's so different from anything I'd ever experienced before. And there's priests chanting, and there's bells ringing, and there's gongs going on, incense burning everywhere. And, so your senses are overwhelmed, as they are in India. And this is this place where death is happening, or has happened, and it's being now, ceremonialized. And the thing that struck me above all of that was how joyous the atmosphere was. There was no wailing. There was no mourning. There was no rending of garments.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of happy.
Huh.
The holy men were happy. They were smiling. If you greeted somebody, or if your eyes met, they smiled and greeted you. And the family standing around Uncle Raj, getting him ready to be lit aflame.
Yeah. They're
singing, they're praying, but they're happy. And what's happening is that everybody's thrilled for Uncle Raj, because he's leaving this life and he's moving on to his next inevitable life. So, because in Hinduism, there's reincarnation, right?
Sure.
So he's moving on. He's ahead of us.
Yeah.
And he's going on into the next realm.
Right.
But he's not dead.
Right.
He's just not with us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that fascinating. And am I wrong, or is the river considered like a deity in
Mother Ganges?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's all that connection for them there, that it's returned to in that direction.
So we'll sprinkle our ashes over Mother Ganges. I mean, the fires are on the water.
I see. You're right. So the pyres are alongside the water, or
yes.
are they right? And so because there are cultures where the floating burning body has been on a pyre, but on a boat of some kind,
like a barge,
raft
like
or a barge, something
apparatus.
along those lines.
That happened. That's there too. They have both. There's so many people dying to get in. You have to burn them everywhere you can.
Very popular, extremely popular. Well, my wife likes to tell the story that her father, every time they would drive by a graveyard, and you have to understand something, that my wife, at one point when she was growing up, her parents had a house that had previously been a crematorium in a cemetery, and had been moved just next to the cemetery. So
she was living in the house.
She was living in a place that had been a crematorium. Yes, and it was a gorgeous place, and it was right next to a very large cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but her father.
Are there other Pittsburghs?
I'm sure there are.
Can
I think there's one in
up?
Ohio. I may be wrong there.
Really?
If you're in Ohio or you know that, write to us and say, Tom, you're a jerk. There's many Pittsburghs, and here's where they are. If you know that. So the story goes that my father-in-law used to say to her all the time, my wife, all the time when they go by the cemetery or any cemetery, he'd say to her, you know how many dead people there are in that cemetery? And she'd say, no, Dad, how many? And he'd say, all of them. And now, if he was in Cairo, he would be wrong.
He'd be wrong.
He'd be wrong.
In
yes.
fact, the majority of them might be alive.
Right. So I wish he was around to tell him that, but unfortunately, he's joined those people, and I'm sure he would find that quite funny right now.
Now, the original religion. I'm not changing the subject.
Please, I'm done with my story.
Moving on.
Yes.
I'm moving
as please do that
as
for
we
us.
all are, and as we all inevitably
moving on is
will.
what this is about, right?
Right. I was thinking about being in India, and on the other side of India, in Mumbai,
yes,
they have a very special celebration for a particular group living in Mumbai. So Mumbai's a big international city,
Right.
And it really was a gateway for a lot of people from lots of parts of the world to come to India.
I believe the English called it Bombay.
Bombay,
correct?
yes, formerly
and then
known
they
as
turned it
Bombay.
back to Mumbai.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, under the British Raj, it was Bombay. Actually, it was the Portuguese that called it Bombay.
Oh, really?
Because they were the first Europeans, or one of the first, to actually discover it before the Brits got there.
Okay.
And in Portuguese, Bombay means beautiful bay.
Oh.
And the city is
So it was really a
shaped as a
compliment
bay.
for the area.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So they called it Bombay.
Mhm.
But anyway, so
Sorry, I didn't mean to divert.
diverge,
No,
divest,
divert.
divert.
Dichotomy. We went the wrong direction.
It sounds
there
like
for
a
moment.
Cole Porter song. Divert, diverge. Well,
Yeah,
so-
careful. Legal's going to be on the phone in a second. Here.
legal. So when Persians
Yes.
came to India, and many did to escape the forced conversion to Islam when the Muslims came to Persia.
Uh-huh.
So before Muslims came to Persia, Persians had their own religion, Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrians, when they left Persia, many of them went to India, moving east, and they came through Bombay.
Yeah.
So there is still, anyway, make a long story short.
You've already made it long, but go ahead. Yeah.
So there's a significant population.
I was going to say I was just going to let you die, but I thought that, you know,
it would have been perfect.
quite appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ending the podcast now.
Just kidding.
Yeah, okay.
We were like,
We actually didn't die.
sorry. Where the heck were we?
Persians.
Yeah.
In Bombay.
Okay.
Okay.
We're back to
so-
cats again?
Not Persian. Cats.
Oh. Okay, yes, and they had a religion prior to
Zoroastrianism.
Yes.
And if they wanted to maintain their religion, they at one point they had to leave. So many of them went east, they went to Bombay, they went to India. And so there's a significant population of Parsis. They referred to them as Parsis.
Okay.
They're not Hindus,
Mhm.
right? They're Persians whose families migrated into India and they've lived in India now for some of them centuries.
For generations. Yeah, many generations.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So anyway, my point about death
Thank goodness
here
we're getting
is
it to it here.
There's a section in Bombay called the Malabar Hills
Uh-huh.
where the Zoroastrians and the Parsis lived and died.
Okay.
And when you died as a Zoroastrian because you believed in the god of fire,
Uh-huh.
thus spake Zarathustra.
Yes,
Zarathustra,
right.
okay, is
I am familiar.
Zoroastrian.
Yes.
Right? So the god of fire. So the belief was, and the ceremony was, and still is, that you don't bury your dead.
Mm-hmm.
You hang them outside and you let nature dispose of the
Oh,
of
yes,
the
you
flesh.
have mentioned this before. Yes.
So they built this huge tower on the Malabar Hills
Uh-huh.
that it's a cement tower with holes in it on the outside and different levels going up.
Yeah.
And there are bodies hanging inside the tower. And the holes were so the vultures could go inside and eat the flesh of the dead people that were hanging there.
Yes, you have mentioned this before, I remember, and it's just as strange to a Western culture person as it was the last time you mentioned it.
Well,
I think,
of late, what's
Yes.
happened is
so to speak. Yes.
there's been this local furor, and the Parsis really aren't hanging their dead on the Malabar Hills anymore because the vulture population has been significantly diminished.
Oh.
And that's because the vultures have been eating pesticides that have been put out for the rats.
Ah, okay.
So the municipal government
but
has
are the
been,
rats also in there with the dead bodies?
I guess
and
they
then
are.
They put the pesticide to keep the rats away. Like, do we really care whether the rats are in there? Or
well,
not?
but the bodies that are hanging up on the top tiers never get the rats.
Okay. Well,
They don't get the roads. They don't
Heaven
get
forbid.
the vultures either.
right.
So this
you're-
is a reverse.
See,
of,
that's that whole,
this is a reverse of
I guess
the
we can't blame that on global warming, but it is a change like that
Yeah,
that makes things. It's the pesticide problem.
It's a pesticide problem.
Okay.
The municipal government set out raticide or whatever they call that stuff.
I'm sure that's the correct term. I'm positive it is.
And so the vultures started eating it, and they died, and so the dead people never get eaten.
You've got an entire body here, and you're such a pig, or vulture in this case, that you've got to eat that and the rat's food.
Right.
Wow. Listen, we've got, we haven't even really spoken either about we talked a little bit about the Irish wake, which is more of a party and the celebration, but there's a little bit of a party not a little bit, there's a party in New Orleans too. We mentioned them before with the above ground mausoleums and the cemeteries, which are above ground in that area because of the water table and floods. And yet when they have a funeral, there is the dirge
joyous.
that's played to the cemetery. And then on the way back, they'll play much more up tempo and much more joyous and festive. And there's a party.
What's happening here is that we are encompassing all the emotions, and we're allowing for the expression of all of the emotions. We're going to be mournful of the passing of our dear friend or family member, whoever it was.
Right.
And so it is dirge-like, or almost, self-consciously dirge-like.
Overly.
Significantly, right. To the burial. And then once the burial occurs, then we have this celebration of this person's life.
Sure.
And that is a joyous, jazz-filled second line event.
It's almost like taking, in a condensed version, stages of mourning and moving on and dealing with death and putting it into the way of speaking in New Orleans, which became so popular and important, which was music.
That's right.
Which is because these are accompanied by bands
and
lines of musicians that.
One morning he felt rather full, his head felt heavy, which made him shake, fell from a ladder and he broke his skull, and they carried his corpse his home to wake. That's Finnegan's Wake, where they lay out Finnegan. He goes on a ladder, he breaks his skull, and he was a drinker all his life. So they get into an argument about how he died and all the people at the wake, and they start drinking and they get into a fight, and then some liquor spills on him and he wakes up. He was never really dead.
Well, that didn't go well, did it?
But everybody
How to spoil a good wake.
Really, don't be dead.
Who invited him?
This is an old Irish folk song.
Oh, well, you would know an old Irish folk song.
And yes, I would. And a great book, by the way.
Well, there you go.
Like Thus Spake Zarathustra.
And if we want to start going that vein, there's so many directions to go with death. But convenient enough, we've come to an end. And on that note, you know what I think, Dean Foster? I think we should say,
oops,
your culture's showing. Smell ya. Just want to bother you one last time to say we're a brand new podcast here at Oops, Your Culture's Showing, and we could really use your help by subscribing to the podcast. And not to mention that if you hung around this long and you liked what you heard, well, this makes it just easier for you to get the podcast. They'll pop up for you whenever they're released, so you can listen to them on your phone or your computer or however you listen to them. And it's easy to get, too. Just subscribe using iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. It really isn't hard, and we could really use your support. So from all of us here at Oops, Your Culture's Showing,